Another night of tensions and some arresting of protesters in Washington, D.C. The scene was really tense the other night. After the final night of the RNC at the White House, Senator Rand Paul and many others, including some of our folks, were harassed leaving that event. Now Senator Rand Paul is among many who are demanding answers about who exactly is organizing and supporting these protesters, backing and writing in an op-ed, quote, who are these people? Who paid for their hotel rooms? Who flew them in? Law enforcement needs to look at the funding of violent criminal activity like this, and National Democrats need to confront it. It's organized, it's paid for, it's violent. It is not about Black lives or any lives. It's about anarchy and destruction, writes Rand Paul. For example, this is the accosting of a New Hampshire RNC representative. This young protester singled him out, and she knew his name. Watch this.
Mr. Ager, how do you feel about the killing of Black individuals in the United States? Mr. Ager, how do you feel about the killing of Black individuals within the United States?
How do you feel about the killing of Black individuals in America? Put your hands on me again, up. Put your hands on me again, and you up. Hands on me again, and now you up.
So Republican Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky joins us now. Senator, thank you for being here. You know, you watch this, I think it's a young woman, totally head covered in this protest moment. She knows the name of this RNC representative from New Hampshire. Now, I would understand that people in New Hampshire might know him. I did not know this man's name. I don't know how many other people would recognize him by sight, but that struck me, sir.
Well, that's the same thing we ran into. And, you know, I have a certain amount of notoriety, but we showed up on the corner. And once someone yelled, "It's Rand Paul, we've got him trapped," then it went from a dozen to 2 dozen to 3 dozen. The crowd got bigger and bigger. But the crowd also kept pressing in. And we fortunately got to a corner where there were a couple of policemen. But we were just all sort of, you know, getting crowded and crowded and crowded, people pushing and shoving. And I really was uncertain whether the police had enough people to actually repel them if it became a full-scale attack. And I said to the policeman, they know who I am. You need reinforcements. He radioed for reinforcements. But I think we still stood there for 10 or 15 minutes with the crowd, you know, closing in on us. And I fully believe if the police had not been there, we would have been drugged to the pavement. We would have been kicked and stomped until we were bleeding from our ears like the people in Portland and in other places. This is something that we should stop. And at the very least, you should be arrested for disorderly conduct. You should be arrested for not letting people move. There's got to be a crime here, inciting a riot. But I know you can't put these people away forever, but they need to be arrested so we can find out who's funding them, how they're getting there. They're staying in $600 to $1,000 a night hotels. They have plane flights to come here. Some of the people we picked out in the footage that were attacking us are from other cities, and we can see them in riots in other cities. So we're now seeing that the people are being flown from Portland to Minneapolis to D.C. for these riots. And it is not your First Amendment to trap people, terrorize them, and threaten to kill them and call them all kinds of awful names. That is not your First Amendment right. That is not in the Constitution.
You mentioned seeing the same people. This one is a woman who was confronting Representative Brian Mast, and this video has also made a lot of you know, people have watched it a lot as it has been replayed. And then you see her in another video. She also shows up in your video. Now, that's just around the block. But, you know, it's interesting to me that these same people are confronting all these different folks. But you've raised a lot of questions here about who's funding them. I don't know what hotel they stayed in. Maybe you have done some digging into that. But, you know, what are some of the answers to those questions, do you think? Who's funding them?
Well, I think the only way we know is through asking a judge. The proper way is we have to get a subpoena, but we should look at their financial records. We should look at who paid for the hotels. We should subpoena airline records. Now, I'm not talking about randomly. I'm talking about for people who are accused of a crime, that we have evidence that they've been committing a crime. And I think it is a crime to incite a riot. It is a crime to threaten people. It's a crime to surround people and tell them they can't move anywhere. This is not a First Amendment. Look, if it were a rally to be against no-knock raids. I have a bill called the Breonna Taylor bill. I'm actually for, get it for reforms of this where we don't do no-knock raids in the middle of the night, and yet they're attacking me. So these people are so clueless and such idiots. They're out there for violence and they're out there for mayhem, but they aren't out there for reform. Look, I've been a part of protests my whole life, protests against big government or protests against this, but we go and we have speeches and we talk about it, and then we knock on the door and we lobby Congress. Yeah. But you don't try to kill people. You don't kick people in the head in the street. The pictures that are out there, we can't have a country that ends up on fire like Portland.
Well, it sounds like Joe Biden has finally come around to thinking that as well. He spoke in Pittsburgh today. He now says, and they did not mention this once at the DNC, about the violence that was happening in the cities. And we've also heard a lot of people downplay it. Oh, it's nothing. It's all peaceful protests. And then you've got, a few rabble-rousers. Anybody who was on the streets of D.C. the other night, and I would imagine that it felt very similar to what you feel on the streets in Portland and some of these other cities. But here's what Joe Biden is saying about this today. Listen to this.
These are not images of some imagined Joe Biden America in the future. These are images of Donald Trump's America today. He keeps telling you, if only he was president, it wouldn't happen. If he was president, he keeps telling us that he was president, you'd feel safe. Well, he is president, whether he knows it or not.
What do you say to that, Senator?
I'd say Joe's confused. These are his supporters. And I haven't heard Joe Biden or Kamala Harris come out and say, what happened to my wife and I and the other two ladies that were with us was wrong. I haven't heard one word of rebuke. They're afraid of these people also, and they're afraid to rebuke them because these are their supporters. This is their base. The people attacking us, attacking the federal building, this is Joe Biden's base, and he needs to disavow them.
But,
look,
Senator, what do you say?
Black Lives Matter, the woman in charge of Black Lives Matter in Louisville said that it was good that we were afraid. She could see fear in our face, and she was happy because that's the way she has to live and they have to live, so we should live in fear also. This is their message,
all right,
that somehow they are living in fear, so everyone else should be terrorized as well. And instead of the message that what a great country we have and you can succeed too if you try hard.
There is no doubt that the feeling that you express is what I was feeling on the street that night as well. And they don't care who they're talking to. They have no idea. It's like pulling down the statues. They don't know what the statues represent or what those people actually did. They did the same thing to you. But what do you say to those who say, well, there are also people on the right who are doing this sort of thing? And they point to Kyle Rittenhouse, who is now accused of killing 2 people.
What I would say is these cities that are on fire are run by Democrats. Do not go and, say you're going to be part of vigilante justice. Run the heck away from these cities, move away from these cities, get away from these cities, but don't go there armed. They're going to have to figure out that their representatives, their Democrat mayors have let them down. But I'm not for militias and vigilantes going to these cities. Stay away from these cities. These cities are in ruin and they're on fire, but they've been on fire because Democrats have been in charge for 50 years in every one of these cities.
Senator Rand Paul, thank you. Good to have you here tonight, sir.
Thanks.
Our thanks to him.